Most of you listening have probably been an entry-level employee at some point. And there's nothing worse than the anxiety of feeling like you're doing a bad job but not knowing what your boss is thinking. It's the worst. The feeling that you could get fired at any minute and you don't know about it. I find that if I go into a conversation, a tough conversation like that, knowing that I'm going to be asking more questions than statements, I find that I have a lot less anxiety going into that conversation.
And they're going to bury themselves. They're going to be, a lot of people are going to be harder on themselves.
Yes.
If you just approach it. So let's talk about your results. How do you think you're doing?
Right.
Like that manager that you said, hey, your 40% needs to be 50%. You bring that same person in and you say, hey, let's talk about your membership conversions.
Yeah.
How do you think things are going there? Oh, gosh. I know I need to be at 50%. Okay. What are some things that you think we can be doing more about or more on? Okay. Oh gosh, I know I can. I have been noticing that I'm only taking 2 minutes with each call. They probably know the answer.
Yes. In most cases, in my experience, they know at least 90% of the answer. You might have found some additional tidbits that you can help them with, but they probably have 90% of the answer. Let them come to you with it. That way they know that you're partnering with them, but you're also not like talking down to them, so to speak, because they're like, I know all this. And then they'll just start to block you out, you know? It's a little bit of that going on.
Leaving them with dignity, approaching it with respect. I think this also shows up for me, and we learned this from one of the early podcasts we did with Michael Mullins. Always be the person who talks well about others when they're not around.
Yes.
I first learned this from Michael Eisner, the CEO of Disney. He wrote a book about the partnership that he had. And the partnership, he spoke about his partner that he had at Disneyland, his right-hand person. And whenever he was in a meeting with someone else, even when people would look to divide them, he always would make sure that, well, that doesn't sound like something that Ray would say. Or he would always give the person the benefit of the doubt that wasn't around.
Right.
And he would never talk bad. Well, you know, that's how Ray always does it.
Totally.
And it's so important that when people hear you, if people hear you knocking other people, they will instinctively think, well, when I'm not around, guess what's happening? So be the person that speaks well about others.
Yeah.
Even when they're not around.
I think, and just to tie this back, right? I think what I'm hearing is that it creates distrust when you do that. And it works against your want to be honest with others and to communicate honestly.
100%.
Yeah.
Yep. And so going at it with the intention that when that other person isn't around, you're going to speak well about them, like intentionally wanting to say nice things about Ray, like before even something comes up. I think the other thing about trust and building trust is being very clear with what the expectations are.
Yes.
On the front end.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of times as managers, we put the pins up, like the bowling pins up, and we put a blanket over them. So they really don't even know where they are, the pins.
Okay.
Whereas if you just lift the blanket up so they can see all 10 pins, chances of them throwing a strike increase dramatically. So it's lifting that blanket off the pins, being clear with what the expectations are on the front end.
Yeah. I think most of you listening have probably been an entry-level employee at some point. We're just going to assume everyone started at a job on day one at some point. And there's nothing worse than the anxiety of feeling like you're doing a bad job but not knowing what your boss is thinking. It's the worst. The feeling that you could get fired at any minute and you don't know about it. I know Stephanie, who we've talked about on the podcast before, even to this day, very paranoid person. God forbid that there is a very serious looking meeting happening near her. She'll be like, am I getting fired? I'm like, I don't think that group of people is getting together to fire you. Just, I'm not to sound like an asshole, but sorry, not to sound rude or anything, but I don't think you're that important, Stephanie. I'm really sorry. And so, but there's nothing worse than feeling like at any moment you could get fired. And that kind of anxiety affects everything about a person, their personal life, their relationship with their spouse, their work, their performance. It can affect so many things to have that constant anxiety that part of their life that they're losing, they could possibly lose their security in their life, right? And so by maintaining that honest, candid conversation with someone and assuring someone you'll never be surprised if you're going to get fired, right? Which is how I like to open. That's how I talk to all my new people.
Listen, great.
You're never going to be surprised if I serve you termination papers.
Yeah.
You will see it coming. Don't worry.
Yeah.
But I've told this to Stephanie at least too, just because we have that relationship, which is, Stephanie, you'll have signed so many documents leading up to a termination. Have you signed any documents? Well, no. Then you're probably not getting fired. Did you steal something?
Right.
Okay. Well, then no, you're not getting fired. You're good. Yeah. Right. Like, so
yeah.
I'm like, that's the kind of candor that you really want to have with your employees and with your coworkers, is that they should never feel surprised when something like that happens. The flip side of that, right, is that they should always know when they're doing a good job. They should always know when they have areas to improve. And by just setting that expectation up front, having those honest conversations becomes a lot easier because they know that you're coming to them so that they won't have that anxiety.
So good. Great. Let's wrap up the third one. Truth.
Yes.
Truth as a culture.
Yes.
Which is really the key to growth. The key to a high performance culture rests on trust.
Yes.
And the speed of trust, because things go so much faster when you have trust. And we've talked about it. This all starts with the leader. The leader sets the tone as to whether the culture is one of trust, one of, as you mentioned, a safe place, candor. And I think candor is caring.
Yeah.
And in today's world, I've shared this, caring is a secret weapon.
Yeah.
It's a secret. It's what you have that separates you as the leader.
It's a superpower.
It really is. If people believe and know and trust that you care, how much easier is it, Amanda?
So much easier.
It is. It is. It is one of the things that I think separates that great leader, that great entrepreneur from the rest, and your people will see it. I believe that if you have that candor and that trust amongst your team members, the environment there, Amanda, is going to be a lot happier of a place to be.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I find too that by establishing that level of candor, people will work harder for you too, because they know what you want, and they want to work for a leader like that. This is going to sound kind of silly, but I remember early in our relationship, we've always had a pretty candid relationship. And very early in our relationship, maybe I was like a year in, but I remember we were in a meeting together and I was just presenting some numbers, and you were citing a couple of numbers off of the report, and you cited a number wrong. And I made this terrible face, like, oh, Kevin's got it wrong. And I just like made this very like big frowny face. And you were like, Amanda, do you have some thoughts? And I'm just explaining, actually, Kevin, blah, 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 in the meeting. I remember you came to me afterwards and you said, hey, listen, I so appreciate you, correcting me on the spot. Thank you for making sure I'm not giving out bad information, blah, blah, blah. But just so you know, maybe don't make that face that big. Maybe if you can just interject afterwards to correct me, or if you can just signal me that you want to interject, whatever it is, maybe don't make that face though. And I remember it. Okay, I know that's a silly story, but I remember thinking in that example, Kevin's going to tell me if I'm messing up. I know that Kevin will tell me if I'm messing up. I remember that moment feeling that we had established a candid relationship in that moment. Not any of our big, landmark moments or milestones in our relationship, right? It was that moment that I remember thinking, Kevin's going to help me grow into a great leader because he's always going to tell me the truth.
That's great. Is when I've made mistakes and I've blown my top. I might have said some hurtful words. I can lie to myself and say that, look, I deserved to get out of line.
When you're a manager, you can't afford to do that. You can't afford to act irrationally. You have to stop and think. But it's so easy for me to then rationalize it to myself to make myself feel better about doing the right thing.